Thank you for joining us. Today's session is Back to the Basics. It's session 4 in a 4-part series. We're calling this one the Holy Grail of Supply Chain Management. So with us today, my name is Jeffrey Porter. I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at StockIQ Technologies. Been in consulting, leadership, software, and supply chain for quite a number of years, and quite a bit of experience in supply chain. Thoroughly enjoy hiking and enjoying. And I'm pleased to be joined by Tim Wise today. Tim, I'll let you go through an introduction.
Tim Wise. I've got a small consulting company called Tight Lines Consulting and Coaching. I have been in supply chain management positions for international companies, Fortune 100, all the way down to very small manufacturing companies for the last 25 years. Started my career in finance, so I've got a very deep finance and supply chain background, and I am a fly fishing enthusiast.
We appreciate your time and your talent that you've brought here. So today's agenda, we're going to be talking about inventory management. Inventory management, we're going to start kind of with the basics, talking about ABC stratification, XYZ analysis. We're going to go into service level and order policy. So we're going to be talking about these in depth. We feel it's a cornerstone and the Holy Grail. This is typically where we see a lot of the benefits and the opportunities. So, Tim, you want to start us off and start talking about pieces of the puzzle?
ABC stratification has been around a long time. There's a lot of value, right, in understanding the items in your inventory, be it either components or FGI or subassemblies, how they contribute to the value of your inventory and how they contribute to supporting your overall go-to-market goals with your product. It's a key starter, right? It's a place to start in understanding how your inventory is made up. What you're buying can be used in a lot of different ways to analyze your inventory. And then the XYZ, this is something that we tend to talk about forecast error more than forecastability. Very few people, right, break these down into what I would call, SKU item forecastability, right? You may have some SKUs or some products out there that are very predictable, steady, or maybe there's some very predictable seasonality that you can forecast, but not all SKUs are created equal, right, in this category. Some of them can have, especially newer products maybe, or either a new category, something along those lines, can have a lot of variability, right, and not make it as easy to forecast, right? And as a result, you want to treat these a little bit differently. And then service level, right? This is really just about how do I want to service these SKUs, right? How do I want to service to my customer? What's the probability that I want to not stock out, right? And we'll talk about various levels of service and the trade-off there, because typically, higher service levels will imply higher inventory levels, but it's also about what kind of risk do you want to put around certain SKUs, right? And if you've got how this starts coming together, if you've got a C level item that is very hard to forecast, you may not want to have a very high service level, or depending on the contribution to the overall value of your inventory, you may want to have a high service level. It just really starts, this is where the art of setting your inventory level starts coming into play. And then order policies, right? Order policies are really, when are you going to order and how are you going to order your goods to be replenished? Is this going to be more on based on actual demand, a sales order? It's going to be based on a combination of safety stock, min-max levels, right? Or, are you really going to wait to even buy anything until you get that sales order, right? More like a buy to order or even make to order type situation. So the combination of all of these, right, Jeffrey, they help you guide you towards your inventory strategy, how much inventory you're going to carry, right? All these factors play into that equation.
Exactly. I like thinking about this pieces of the puzzle as well as operationalizing our goals, our objectives, and our strategies, because at the end of the day, following this matrix and taking it all the way down into the policies that are executing on our strategy is really what we're talking about here.
So this just talks about, how you might go about classifying, right? Either as a percentage of revenue, percent of the item count, pretty traditional split here, right? Where, you're typically going to have a concentration of A items that maybe, 15, 20% of your inventory, B items in kind of in that middle category. And then you may have, a long tail of C items that make up um, the other 50%, right? So it's just another a way to depict how you want to classify your inventory to get, to make up the 100% of your inventory value. The classes you can use, right? You can have as many classes, 1 to 5. You could have 3. You could only have 2 if you wanted to. But typically, you're looking at the sales history, right? Number of months of forecast. You might be looking at Paretoing out big values around either percent of inventory value, percent of sales value, right? You could do it that way as well. But it's really about what kind of velocity are you having on this product, right? Are you getting a lot of hits on it? Is the COGS make up a significant part of your COGS and your margin? And then how often are you updating this data, right? Are you refreshing this weekly, daily? Obviously, if you're taking orders, you're probably looking at it daily. And then you can also do it by site, right? Product category, product subcategories. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of slice your ABC. This just gives you some guidelines on how to do that. I find that typically the revenue is really a good one to start with. Where are you generating your revenue from? And then you can break that down into COGS as well.
And just a couple other points on here from a classification. Oftentimes, when we see clients that are not using a technology or an automated or a real process in here, we typically have been assigning a classification to an item at its introduction, or maybe 6 months, 3 months, 6 months into it. One of the challenges with this is as your products fluctuate, maybe one picks up steam, more revenue generated, maybe we're selling more of it. The overall position of that individual SKU can change. So the key takeaway in the ABC classification is do this on a frequency that really reflects the movement and the change of your mix of products, because that's a really important, because it's a foundation upon which we begin looking at what service objective we want to tie to these, and on down the road down to the overall execution.
So this is, the XYZ is really talking about the forecastability or predictability of items, right? You can see the various models down below. X, not as much variation, right? You can see that over time, this thing had some peaks, has come down and kind of leveled out. Y, going to see a lot more variability, right? And then Z, probably going to be infrequent. And then when you do get those, they may appear to be even outliers with your demand profile for a given SKU. So, and as you go through there, Y and Z are just going to get more difficult to predict and difficult to forecast.
And it doesn't mean that these items or SKUs that you have in your mix are unimportant, meaning they may be a real key item for us to be carrying. Aptly identifying how they behave will help us establish the right stocking policies, the right safety stocking policies. In fact, if we're in service parts business, auto parts businesses, we often find that, or replacement parts, that this is a typical behavior that can make up 60 to 70% of your overall total SKU count. So understanding how they behave is a really important factor as you begin this overall analysis.
The calculation, right, of these forecastability, pretty standard statistical, either using coefficient of variation, statistical model error, and then usage patterns, right? Are they more recurring? Are they more sporadic or slow? But these are pretty standard, especially if you have some type of technology that's helping you do either your forecasting or your replenishment planning. These are pretty standard models that can be used, and they're quite effective, right? If you've got some good history of product, and even that history can be used to apply to similar new products potentially as well. So they can actually give you some really good data on the forecastability of your product and how that plays out over time.
And as Tim was talking about earlier, when we talk about inventory carrying in our service, this is directly correlated with our forecasting error. So these measures help us determine what the optimal inventory for an item is. I would tell you that it's not uncommon for folks to say, we're going to apply a 2 or a 3 week safety stock value for all of our A-based items, and it's flat across the board. By going through and doing this analysis, it affords you the opportunity to precisely identify exactly how much inventory for the item based on its variability, because these are really measures of variability. High variability, we're going to have to carry more inventory to support our service goals. With a low forecast error, we can actually skinny up the inventory quite a bit and still meet those high service goals. So this is a really key measure for us as we begin looking at our inventory investment, and it gives us the ability to fine tune where we're going to invest and where we're not going to invest.
Yeah, I would add, Jeffrey, that the forecastability is one of the most sensitive variables in setting inventory policy and safety stock policy. So it's really important to understand what that variability is going to be. Now, the service level, right? So this is classic, the classic efficient, I call it the efficient frontier curve that shows you service level with inventory investment, unit investment. And you can see as you get out in the upper 90s, the inventory requirements go up pretty significantly, right? Once you start getting in the 97, 98, 99, doesn't even the smallest increases at that point are going to drive a tremendous amount of inventory investment, right? Now, in some cases that may be good, but most of the time, you're going to be probably somewhere more in that 90 to 95 range. I don't probably recommend setting a lot of 99.999% service level policies, but just because it's the hockey stick there to set the inventory is just really too expensive. And I'm not sure there's a lot of benefit associated with that, right? So that's a service level. And then usually your A items are going to have the higher service levels, right? And, if you're down at thinking you only want to support something 50% of the time, you might be considering, going more to a buy to order, make to order type policy on instead of trying to stock that inventory at all.
One thing that I'd like to add to this, and this comes from experience, in that oftentimes when I was in industry, we were the recipient of two conflicting goals, meaning we want to carry 10 million in inventory or 50 million in inventory. And by the way, we want 12 turns. So this is really quite a conundrum for individuals without the ability to characterize what the forecast error is and the associated inventories to support that. So this is a very, very empowering curve from the standpoint that we can pick one of the variables. What's the variable that we want to pick? Is it service objective? And the service objective will correlate to an inventory position based on this curve and based on the forecast error. If we want inventory, basically what we're going to do is we're going to pick what service level we're going to accomplish without heroics based on the service level where it coincides. So this curve is really empowering, especially for the individuals that are responsible for managing inventory, because they can derive what the other result will be, meaning you tell me what you want the inventory to be, which will determine turns. I will share with you what the associated service that we're going to likely see on those items. So anyway, I really like this because it gives the organization the ability to identify what they want to accomplish, and then in the execution level, we can go out and do it because we have the relationship here. I'd be happy to take us through this one, Tim, if
you bet.
If you permit me, and then I'll let you type in or add some commentary to it. So when we begin looking at safety stock, as Tim mentioned, safety stock in a classical statistical sense is going to be very, very sensitive to the forecast error. Now, what we're showing here on this graph is the concept of replenishment over time. You will note over here on the y-axis, we are identifying how much stock we have on hand. And then on the x-axis, we're looking from today out to the future, so as we move to the right. This line that we're showing in here represents the inventory balance that we're carrying. So As we fill orders, our inventory goes down. As we get orders in, it's going to replenish those inventory levels, and the cycle goes on. This is oftentimes referred to as a sawtooth diagram. Now, the safety stock representation in here really is to say that if I want to guarantee a service level, given the fact that there's variability, meaning sometimes the demand is greater than we forecasted, sometimes it's less, that I can selectively identify what my service objective is that I want. It is a function of, by the way, the safety stock that we're calculating becomes a function of the forecast error, the lead time to replenish, meaning we need to account for the lead time, not the full lead time, but we take the square root, and then the demand at that lead time. So this safety stock level then is correlated directly with that service objective, and it really becomes the floor of the inventory that we are trying to not go down below. And it's that extra buffer that's put in place to accommodate the fact that, hey, orders might be greater than what we forecasted. We've got inventory in there. It doesn't mean that we're not going to stock out, but what it says is we're going to protect our service level in there with that extra buffer. And then we subsequently replenish that. So in there, when we look at service level, the service level is really determining how big that buffer is on the bottom, right? I mean, as Tim mentioned, we can take that close to 100%. It's going to be a lot of inventory in most cases, or we can lower it. So anyway, as you begin looking at it, that safety stock as it relates to how we replenish is that foundation that we're putting in place.
To me, this is the math, right, Jeffrey, that kind of gets us to what we would consider, a targeted service level with a safety stock, a min-max on our inventory, which is all very, very useful, right? I think the challenge becomes, right, where do you apply this? How do you apply it? Which products, right? Which inventory components? That becomes a challenge because a lot of the tools that people are using now to plan replenishment aren't very sophisticated, right? And sometimes they want to peanut butter, what I call peanut butter spread it. They might want to take more of a generic approach, like you said. I'm going to hold 2 weeks because the lead time's this, or a lot of people get focused on the lead time and kind of forget about service level and forecast error.
Yeah, very good point in there. And you're right. This is really where we start separating and identifying how we're going to replenish each of them. And it's very difficult to do if you're doing it manually. Another component in here as well is as we move in and out of seasons, the safety stock values change relative to the forecasted usage. We've also seen lead time variability that come into case here. So this calculation lends itself to recalculating on a frequent basis versus that peanut butter spread. Peanut butter spread is going to leave us with too much inventory or not enough. So when we talk about the Holy Grail in here, really what we're talking about doing is pinpointing exactly how much inventory is required from a safety stock perspective or a buffer to meet our goals and objectives in the organization. So as we start talking about these goals and objectives, it's really a big deal. Is where do we want the service to come in? And I'm going to pop back to that previous slide because I think this is an important conversation. In an organization, the sales department typically is wanting to reside over here on the right-hand side of this curve. 100% service level, important client, I do not want to run out. Finance, on the other hand, is leaning towards the left. Operations is kind of caught in the middle trying to balance this out. So we talked in previous sessions about this collaboration, but this really becomes a dialogue within the organization, which is strategically, we need to come together and identify what that service is going to be, and then let the operations come forward and calculate what the associated amount of inventory is going to be to support that goal and objective.
A broad set of products, right, Jeffrey, that are maybe at different parts of their life cycle as well, right? Maybe some are going end of life. You get some new products, right? Those products they're not going to be treated equally around that curve, right? It's like, okay, I'm transitioning to a new product. I'm obsoleting this one. I want to drop my service level. I don't want to have a bunch of those items laying around as I'm introducing new product. But if you're going back generically and applying some type of generic policy, you're not going to be able to have that fine tuning. And this also allows you to articulate with finance, sales, right, it being an operation, that's really the heart of the conversation is what am I trading off here? What kind of risk am I willing to take? And what can I afford to invest, right? Those are the key questions we're trying to answer when we're looking at inventory investment.
You bet. Yeah, the entire organization rallies around this.
Yep. So, lots of different ways to set your order policies, right? And you can use an order point, lot for lot, min max, fixed quantity, sporadic sales. There's various ways, right? That if you're going to be stocking items, you can use those, but also the non-stock items, right? Everything down to obsolete, do not order, et cetera, et cetera. So this helps you get those. If you have a technology that can actually support these various levels, then this helps you manage, like, what do I need to buy, right? And when am I buying it, and how often, and those types of questions, right? And you can set these. Obviously, you can change them as the products may change over time, but you can set these based on the other factors we just got done talking about.
So let's put it all together, Tim, and let's bring these ABC, the XYZ, the service level, and the order policies together. And how do we manage these? And I'll kind of take the first swat at this, which is this becomes a matrix of sorts. Now, this matrix is going to be lined up to the point where we're lining things up over on the left. In that vertical column, these are recurring. These are easy to manage. If we begin looking as we move to the right, they become less manageable, more difficult to understand, more difficult to predict. So we may take a different approach to overall manage them. And then as we begin looking at the overall roles, this is that stratification when we talked about our A's, our B's, and C's and D's. Now, one note when we talk about this, if we're looking at revenue generated from an item, we'll likely fall in that 90-10, 80-20, 70-30, where smaller percentage of the parts are making that up. With that being said, as we move down, we may have a D-based item that's a critical. So if you're a distributor, you may actually come out and say, you know what, my customers come to me because I carry a full line of product. Well, a D-based item may not be generating a lot of revenue for you, but it may be a critical component in your overall mix. So we provide the ability to come down there and still goose the service level, meaning we can still put a high service level to guarantee availability. There's this approach of being able to look at this dimensionally and make decisions around how we're going to replenish it, right? So we'll go into the key takeaways at this point. Key takeaways today. So inventory policies are not generic based on lead time or product category. And not all SKUs are created equal. You need to analyze your inventory to segment it. You may take a look at it by ABC, forecastability, and services we've talked about before, and that will help us determine what order policy we're going to be utilizing. Another key takeaway, available tools and technology really to determine these inventory levels and stocking goals. I made a note a little bit earlier that as we're going through here and we're doing these calculations, sometimes it's important for us to begin calculating these things on a regular basis. It might be seasonality. It might be fast product moving. Maybe we have a smaller lead time or changes. So it's very, very important as we're going through here to go through and use that technology, which gives us the ability to recalculate these things pretty frequently.
All right, so we've finished our learning series. You can get the recordings, but this is the last of we've been talking about 3 supply chain capabilities to address in 2023. We talked about planning, we talked about supplier management, and today we hit on inventory management and inventory planning.
Yeah, and thank you for attending. We certainly appreciate this. If you have other topics that you would like us to address, certainly bring those forward. We'd be happy to address those, add those into future webinars. This all started with Tim coming out and saying, hey, we have a new year. Let's get back to basics. Let's start this off on the right foot. These are the foundations that we like to start with. Here's my contact information. You can also see Tim's out there. Tim, thank you so much for lending your expertise here in these sessions. Thoroughly appreciate your finance background, your supply chain background. It's been great. Thoroughly enjoyed these conversations.
Same here, Jeffrey.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your attendance. And for those folks that are watching this on recording, thank you for watching the recordings. Certainly feel free to reach out to us if we can be of any assistance. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.